Lovely to meet you. If I've not seen you in the first couple of weeks that I've been here, my name's Tim, as already has been said. My wife and I live in Cheltenham currently with our daughter Poppy, so we're like commuting in. So I feel like new to this community, but in some ways on the outside still, looking in as we sort of navigate. So if you're here for the first time and you feel like you're on the outside of whatever this community is, I'm with you, and hope that the Lord encounters you today and meets with you. I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy called Dietrich Bonhoeffer. A few nods. If you don't know who Dietrich Bonhoeffer is, he was a German pastor / theologian, wrote prolifically during the Second World War, and he wrote this about community. He says, the person who loves their dream of community will destroy community. The person who loves their dream of community will destroy community. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there are competing visions of what community is. There are the visions of community that look like friendship. There are visions of community that center around sports. There are visions of community that look like parish notice boards with lots of activities going on. There's also forced community. This is what my mind came to when I thought of forced community. There should be a slide. There we go. Forced community, boys. There's also community that's homogenous, where people fight for the idea that it needs to look the same as everybody. And we've seen a bit of that this week. People who are on the streets fighting for her vision of homogenous community. And then we've seen the contrast of that, those of us that see the beauty that diversity brings to our community and where that's needed and wanted. And so I'm saying all this to say that there are competing visions of community. But it's not as simple as saying, let's have a conversation about community and recognize that we're all on the same page. Not even our society is. And so the question with all of these competing visions of what community is how do we build community? Namely, how do we build, as followers of Jesus, Christian community? What does that look like? How do we do that? What does it look like to be involved? And in our reading today, Paul, in his letter to the church in Thessalonica, gives us some pretty clear instructions. And to those we'll look at now as we think about what it looks like to build Christian community. So he says in verse 14, we urge you, brothers and sisters, warn those who are idle. Warn those who are idle. When it comes to building Christian community, the challenge and invitation is that we're all invited to participate. We're all invited to play a part. And if you've read the story of the early church in Acts, you'll be familiar with the idea that it was common practice in the early church to share all that they had with one another so that no one was in need. And we read that in Acts 2 or in Acts 4, somewhere in early Acts anyway. And so it's not too far to assume that the church in Thessalonica was seeking to do that. But unfortunately, it seemed that there were some who were happy not to work because they could live off the generosity of others. And so what Paul is trying to do here is he's trying to challenge the church to warn those who are able to contribute but only willing to consume. And he's challenging the church to warn those who are in that position. So why is that important? Why is Paul so concerned with that? Why is Paul so concerned that there are some people in that church community in Thessalonica that are able to contribute but only willing to consume? Well, it's a little bit like my lower back, okay? Now, a few weeks ago, we were driving back from being on holiday in North Devon, and it was a long drive. It was 7 hours. It should have took 2.5, but lots of traffic. Everyone had the same idea, and the M5, as we all notoriously know, is awful. And so the traffic was bad, which meant I was driving for 7 hours we stopped a few times, but my left foot took much of the brunt of that drive for clutch control. And what that meant was I put a lot of pressure on my lower back. When I got home, my lower back popped. And I slipped a disc, and it's been causing me pain ever since. And so I've got sciatic pain down my left leg. And my wife, Melissa, she said to me, Tim, you can't live with that pain any longer. You've got to do something about it. And so a friend of hers is a chiropractor. So I went to see a chiropractor, which in and of itself is an experience. They specialize in the spine. And basically through looking at me and doing some sort of tests and cracking my neck, what he told me was the reason that my lower back was in so much pain was that the glutes, yes, the buttocks, had disengaged. They had literally just turned off. At some point in my life, they just decided to stop contributing to the body. And what that meant was that my posture was now misaligned. It meant that my lower back was in severe pain, and other areas of my body were on fire because of the pain. So I think Paul is concerned about those who are able to contribute but only willing to consume, because like my glutes, if we just decide to turn off, we cause a risk to the body. Another analogy that Paul uses to describe the church, or someone does anyway in the Bible, talks about the church being the body of Christ. And if we're just idle, if we're just not contributing, if we're able to but not willing to, the risk is, the impact is that the body has a misaligned posture to the mission of God, and that others of us will feel pain because of it. And so Paul's really concerned. He wants people to contribute wholeheartedly to the mission of the church, for everybody to contribute. But how? And in what ways? Well, the first way is to be encouraging. That's the first way. So Paul says this. He says, we urge you, brothers and sisters, warn those who are idle. Encourage the disheartened. There were those in the church of Thessalonica who they'd become disheartened by their circumstances. So if you read prior to chapter 15, there's a section, chapter 5, sorry. There's a section in my Bible, in the NIV, that is entitled Believers Who Have Died. So there's something going on in the church of Thessalonica where there is grief that has stricken that community. And that because of that grief, there are people who are deconstructing their theology. They are new followers of Jesus. They're close-ish to the resurrection and ascension of Jesus. And they're wondering, is this hope that we were promised ever going to come true? Is Jesus ever going to return? And so they were disheartened. And this disheartened group needed encouragement. But the kind of encouragement that Paul is getting on about here was not this kind of like positive mental attitude type encouragement that we see so often in society. Like, you can do it, keep going, it's going to be okay, it'll all be all right in the end. It's slightly different. And I don't know if you've come across the story of Lola Anderson the last couple of weeks. So this is Lola Anderson. She rose for Team GB. And in 2012, she was 14 years old. And at 14 years old, she watched Helen Glover and Heather Stanning win gold at London 2012. And as soon as she saw them win, she grabbed a pink highlighter and her Jack Wills diary, and she wrote in her diary with this pink highlighter, "My name is Lola Anderson, and I think it would be my biggest dream in life to go to the Olympics in rowing and, if possible, win gold for GB." But immediately she became disheartened because she realized that I'm only 14 and that dream is so far away. That feels too good to believe. And so she became disheartened by her present circumstances, and thinking that that future that she imagined would never arrive, she ripped it out of the diary and threw it in the bin. Apart from her dad, Don, emptying the bin that night, found the note, and he pocketed it, put it in his pocket. 7 years later, he gave it her back. And she reread the note. He encouraged her by reminding her of a future that she imagined. 2 months later, he passed away, sadly, of cancer. But on Wednesday, the 31st of August, 2024, Lola Anderson, in a rowing boat with 3 other women, pipped the Netherlands to the post and won gold for Team GB. The type of encouragement that Paul has in view here is the encouragement that comes from helping others see their present circumstances through the lens of not an imagined future, but a promised future. In Philippians, Paul writes in his letter to that church, he says, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead, I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Christ Jesus, is calling us. And so we're invited and challenged to be encouraging, to help people see their present circumstances through the lens of a promised future. The second thing that Paul encourages the church in Thessalonica and invites us to do the same is to be helpful. He says, we urge you, brothers and sisters, warn those who are idle, encourage the disheartened, and help the weak. Help the weak. Now, if you're like me, the irony of this idea of helping the weak is that I often feel too weak to help. Right? And sometimes that's because I assume that others are willing to help. So at New Wine a couple of weeks ago, I was happily, with a group of people at night, just having a glass of wine with some cheese and some pork scratchings. If you've never had pork scratchings, you've got to try them. And it suddenly got really windy. And then so if you know James and Emma Ellen, they've got like 2 kids. They were asleep in their tent, right? So they're a family asleep in their tent. And then the wind suddenly, to the right-hand side, this purple gazebo, just took off. Like a empty bag of crisps in the wind, just flew. And lots of people went and helped. Me, I just sat there with my pork scratchings. Partly because my instinctive response was, I just assumed that others would help, and they did. There was no need for me. And but then so anyway, that was one reason why I feel too weak to help sometimes, is I assume that others will help. At other times, I assume that actually there's other people better placed to help. And that weakness must mean that that other person needs someone who is more trained than I am to help. That person needs a member of clergy to help, or their life group leader to help, or a counselor, or a therapist. And at times, it is vital and important for us to seek professional help. And that is needed. And we need to be people that, at times, because the time is right and the circumstances that it is the right thing, that we point people to that professional help. But for most time, in our weakness, for most of the time, it's not that we need a professional, but we need a fellow follower of Jesus with us to walk beside us and alongside us as we seek professional help, as we journey through our circumstances. Again, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he says this. He says, in the presence of a psychiatrist, I can only be a sick man. In the presence of a Christian brother or sister, I can dare to be a sinner. So whether we feel too weak to help or we are in need of help, Paul reminds us that our weakest points are where Jesus' strength takes over. Speaking about a metaphorical thorn in his side, which was making him weak, Paul writes to the church in Corinth, he says this, he says, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, to take this weakness away. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my abilities. No. Or my strength. No. I will boast all the more about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That's why, for Christ's sake, I delight in my weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. When I am weak, then I am strong. So for some of us, we're hiding behind the shame that our weakness projects. And we feel like we can't be weak because that's a show of weakness. But actually, Paul's reminding us that it's a show of strength to allow Christ into our weaknesses, because it's there that his strength, Christ's strengths, take over. So, be encouraging, be helpful. And the final thing that Paul encourages the church in Thessalonica that I want us to focus on is this idea of being patient with everyone. Be patient with everyone. You know, the world in which we live in does not necessarily train us to be patient. If you wanted to order a gazebo for tomorrow to be delivered at your door, Amazon Prime will help you in that effort. You don't need to be patient. My daughter, who's 2, she has grown up with TV on demand. So not only can she have Dougie any time of the day that she wants. I mean, we're parents, so we're trying to control that. But she also gets to choose the specific episode that she wants. She doesn't have to be patient to wait for her favorite TV show to come on. The invention of air fryers, anyone's got one, means you can speed up the process of cooking your chicken or Mediterranean vegetables for those of us that are vegan. Society doesn't train us to be patient, and yet here is Paul inviting us to be patient with everyone. And there's more to patience. Often we think that patience is like passively waiting for things to change. And there's more to patience than passively waiting for something to change. The verb I've read this week in a commentary used by Paul here is better translated into forbearance. And so patience, I think Paul is getting at. Patience is for tough times. Forbearance, though, is for tough people. Patience is for tough times. Forbearance is for tough people. And there's no one better at expressing forbearance with others, with tough people, I think, than Jesus. And if you've read the story of Jesus calming the storm, I think that's a perfect picture of one of the moments where Jesus has to sort of bear with his disciples, his apprentices. Because the disciples at this point had been with him some time. And they just literally, if you read the account in Matthew, before that account in Matthew of the storm, what comes before is like Jesus has healed a man with leprosy. He's healing loads of people. He's healed a centurion's daughter from distance. And he's gone to Simon Peter's house to heal his mother-in-law. And yet when in a boat, Jesus is with them in a boat, as a storm whips up in a frenzy, and they get rocky on the boat, the disciples had a panic. And they wake Jesus up, and Jesus wakes up and rebukes the storm. And they all say, "What kind of man is this?" And it's like, guys, I read it as a 21st century follower of Jesus, and it's a bit more obvious to me than it was to them perhaps. But they're with Jesus, and it's like, can you not see who he is? And Jesus has to bear with them again and again and again in all these moments where they have this just a different vision, a different idea of who Jesus is and what he's about and what he's like and what he's up to. And Jesus has to be patient with them, bear with them as they stumble through the narrow path, as they follow him. And so patience isn't just about how we weather the storm, but it's how we guide others through it. And there'll be people that we know that have either been following Jesus for a long time, they're getting to know him, or they don't know him at all. And it's like, I just want to give up on you, because it's just like, I've been in this conversation again and again and again, and nothing seems to change. And Paul invites us, as he encourages the church in Thessalonica, to not give up, but be patient. And to not just see patience as a game of waiting for circumstances to change, as a way of us getting through a storm, but as the way in which we help others navigate the storms that they're in. So as I come to land, let's just recap. So how do we build Christian community? Well, first of all, we all play a part. And we all play a part in encouraging the disheartened, helping the weak, and being patient with everyone. And what I'd want to say to us today is that the Christian community that you and I experience tomorrow hinges on the one that we're willing to build today. The Christian community that you and I get to experience tomorrow hinges on the Christian community that we decide to build together today. And so for those of us, we're sitting here and we can feel this kind of uncomfortable calling from God to begin to contribute. And if that is you, what I want to say is just remember that God, whilst he challenges us to contribute to the building of a Christian community, he never gives up on us because he loves us. And he's patient with us, waiting for us to join with him, to partner with him in the building of Christian community so that his son might be known by those that are yet part of the Christian community that we get to build. For others of us, we're here today and we actually are the disheartened group. And we're the ones in need of encouragement from our brothers and sisters this morning. And if that is you, what I want to say to us is that know that situation you find yourself in is not the end of the story. That one day, as Revelation paints this beautiful picture, there will be no more suffering, there will be no more pain, there will be no more tears to cry. That suffering will end. And until that day, Jesus is with you in the storm. And he surrounds you with brothers and sisters who are willing and able to be patient with you as you navigate the storm of life that you're currently in. And so my encouragement to you is don't hide yourself away because you feel like you're weak, but be brave and be honest with someone today about your weakness, about your struggle, so that brothers and sisters might be able to begin that journey with you. And know that if we are feeling weak for whatever reason, that the location of our weakness is the very location of God's encounter with you this morning. That it's in that place, it's in our weakness that his strength is made evident and known. It takes time for people to begin to contribute, for the disheartened to experience joy, for the weak to grow in strength. And we therefore, friends, need to be patient with one another. And we mustn't give up on one another and assume that the idle and the disheartened or the weak are somebody else's concern because they're not in our life group or they're not in our youth group or they're not part of this church or they're not living on our road or they're not from our country. They don't speak my language. But instead, the Christian community we experience tomorrow hinges on the one that we decide to build together today. And so as we think in a moment about how we're going to respond to this in prayer ministry, and as I assume the band will pick up instruments again. I think that's what we do here, isn't it? Okay, great. I'm still new, so I'm getting used to it. Do you know what I mean? I'm also from a Pentecostal tradition, so Shabbat. You know what the world has always needed, will always continue to need,